Hello, everybody. My name is Dr. Matt Stranek, and I just hit record. And this is the first in a brand new, as yet untitled, Writers on Writing-ish kind of interview series. And this is kind of something that's rather apart from some of the other podcast initiatives that I've been part of, and I dare say even the newsletter, 506 Report, for those of you who are on Substack. That's going to be where this recording with a significant regional author, I'm going to say local author, because Bea Waters is from my part of Canada, and we did know each other back in the childhood years. We're not going to go far into that because this is a real professional kind of interview, and I have some real professional kind of questions. This will be supplemented with a questionnaire so that we are going to take up about 30 minutes here, and it's going to be worth sticking around for every single second of them. It is so grateful, I'm so grateful rather, Bea, that we have this opportunity to connect after all these years, and that you were able to clear a bit of time on a busy Saturday, obviously Saturday around the home, always stuff going on. Thanks a lot for being here, and how's it going?
Thanks for having me. And yeah, like we go way back, but it's amazing that social media kind of keeps you in touch with people that you wouldn't necessarily keep in touch with as an adult that you knew as kids. I think it's really cool what you've done with your life. I'm talking to Dr. Matt, like, yay you. And then you want to know what's going on with me. Okay, so I'm a really creative person. I've always thrown myself into creativity. That this painting here is not mine, but that one is. So I have paintings like hanging around my house because I love to just be creative. I create recipes all the time, so I'm like creative in the kitchen. But I've always loved words. I've always had a big passion for words, and so I've become an author. I used to be a communications officer for the government of Canada. So when I say that I love words, I actually like worked my way up through corporate stuff, and I used to write pieces for CBC and all of that, and worked my way up. And then COVID hit, and my contract finished, and there was a lot of chaos, and I didn't find anything else, and I decided this is the time that I'm going to start writing my own series of books. So this is book one of my series, Project Human. And for those who are just listening, I'm holding up a book that shows a girl on the cover doing a dance out in a cornfield, and an alien spaceship has come to check out the light that she is creating. This is not light from the spaceship. That's why it's in front of the spaceship. So anyone who wants to see my book cover who can't see it because you're listening to this on audio, you can go to projecthumanbooks.com and you'll be able to see all my stuff there. I'm also, so currently, like this book I published in November 2023. And then my mom passed away this summer, which we're not going to get into, but it was really sad, and it took me away from working on my projects. And so now I'm back at it. I really wanted book two to be out in November 2024, and it got delayed, but it's I'm currently in the editing process. I've done the first major edit. I'm going through, I do my own editing because I'm very confident in the layering of the stories and how I construct them. And I would really have a hard time with somebody else knowing all the craziness that's in my head, and that they would maybe pull something out that was supposed to be there. So I'm very meticulous about that, but I always have a professional proofreader proofread my book, and I have beta readers and alpha readers. And so I go through the entire process that a person who is being published by Random House would go through, except for I can get through it a whole lot faster because I'm not some big giant corporate machine. And I hire professionals. So the cover art for Project Human is actually the painting that's behind my head, and that was painted by local artist Jim Middleton. So I am a local author who is employing a local artist to do my work, and we're going to get together really soon to talk about book two. And that book is called Atlantis Rising. So that continues the adventures of Olivia Carpenter and all of the galactic aliens that she meets in book one. And it digs more into the bad guys in book two. So it's a very, very interesting piece of writing that I'm doing right now. And then I'm also working on a couple of nonfiction books at the same time. One of them is a reaction to Trump thinking he can make Canada the 51st state. I'm very Canadian. I am not at all cool with that. And so I'm fired up and my writing is a little bit vicious, and I think I'll probably need to tone it down a little bit in the edit, but I don't want to offend any Americans. I have lots of American friends who are wonderful people, but we're not the same society and we don't want to join with your society. And yeah, so I'm writing about that. And then I'm also writing a nonfiction book called I Am Her. And it was something that I started writing for my mother when she got sick. And it was meant to be meditations that she could do herself at home to help her get healthy and help her get well and help her rebalance her energy field. We all have an auric energy field. You can actually photograph that stuff. I think it's called chiralian photography, but I'm probably getting the word wrong. But anyway, so these meditations I was writing for her, and I didn't get the book done by the time she passed. So I had to kind of put it aside, but now I'm back. So that's why it's called I Am Her. Like, a guy could use it and he could change the meditation to I Am Him. But the concept of I Am Her is I am the absolute best version of me that I can be. And that's what I was like writing. So it was a whole ode to my mother. So obviously I have to finish that one too. Just in respect for her and the lovely life that she gave me. So that's what I'm all up to right now.
Wow. In a word, wow. W-O to the W. That is awesome. And there's a lot of different places that I think we could go with that. First and foremost, condolences on the passing of your mom. Obviously, you know, it's a lot to go through. And again, that what you just described as this sort of tribute to her and her life and her spirit is, I think, one of the awesome aspects of the creative endeavor writ large, because, you know, you always have part of your brain that's just kind of going, well, you know, what am I thinking and feeling about this? Maybe if I sort of put it together in a way that makes sense for myself, then others will find something to relate to. And I'm a writer, sort of, but I'm more of an educator. And so what you just described, I mean, I find, I think, a lot of singularity in what you described as your journey, but then also a lot that people, I think, could relate to, especially as you get older, as people start to kind of leave and there's fewer of the people you came with, right? That's just the nature of the thing. And so I am going to keep it to the professional questions, the professional questions, keep the observations to a minimum, because I'm really interested here in when writing sort of, you've always sort of had it as a sort of professional sort of motivation, it sounds like, for quite a while within your career. Like when you were a kid, like when we were back at the daycare and stuff, I mean, do you have like sort of a clear recollection of your early interest in writing or literacy, or was it not something that you kind of jumped into until a bit later in your years? Again, just curious for the people who wouldn't know that about it.
Yeah, okay, so my mother always sat down and read to me at bedtime and even during the day, and I started reading by the age of 4. So when I went to grade 1, I went into French immersion, but I could already read in English. And I got picked on from day 1 of grade 1. The head girl of the school decided that nobody was going to, she didn't like me, nobody was going to be friends with me. And it was a long, lonely road of reading books at lunchtime and entertaining myself with my imagination. And that developed into, okay, I'm going to write my own book. And so in grade 5, I was 11 years old, and I was writing a book, and I was sitting up on the rocks at Connaught Street Elementary School, the big rocks, and I was hiding there and I was reading, and these shadows came and loomed over me, and they said, "What you doing?" And I said, "I'm writing." And they're like, "What you writing?" And I said, "I'm writing a novel." And they're like, "Read it to us." And I had 2 choices. I could either comply, or they were going to grab my papers and rip them all up, and it would like rain down like snow on the playground. And I wasn't having that. I knew what was coming. So I sat down and I buried my head and I started reading. And after the second page, I looked up and all of them were like this. They were just enwrapped. And that was the first time that I had found anything that could stop the bullying. And I was like, oh my God, like that became my thing. Like, my words could soothe the savage beast. I obviously have a knack for storytelling and for writing. And so my life has been this twisty, turny place of like, I've written film scripts and I've written TV scripts, and I wrote a whole, not just a whole album of songs, but I wrote like 50 songs and then did an album in 2006. It's always been creative and it's always been about the words. So I've always kind of been there, and I know the core of where that comes from. And I think knowing why I'm so passionate about being a writer actually is a really solid foundation and helps propel me forward. It's one of those things where it's not like, am I going to succeed? Because I succeeded at 11. So I never have that worry of, am I going to succeed? And my book has 5 stars on Amazon. It doesn't have a whole lot of reviews yet because it doesn't have a whole lot of publicity, but it's damn good writing because I've been doing this for my whole life.
I think there's so much there that you can relate to. And again, just to sort of, just to unpack this a bit for sort of the folks who would be watching this or encountering it outside of sort of immediate shared social networks. Because again, Fredericton's a small place, relatively speaking. I grew up there, right, until I was almost 30 years old before I left. You're still based there, right? You've had a whole life there. You know, you have a family, right? You've grown up in Fredericton. And Fredericton's awesome. I don't think enough people realize how generally, just like how awesome the Maritimes are as a place, as a region. And then Fredericton, I mean, it was awesome. So when you talk about Connaught Street and that whole experience, I know what you mean and I can visualize that. And it's those kinds of sort of trauma-informed experiences a bit that can sometimes sort of bring out qualities in ourselves that we didn't necessarily know were there, and then sort of do tend to be of value later on. Diamonds being created by great pressure and the like, right? So
I'm very much a person who thinks like, if life is going to give me lemons, I'm going to make lemonade. So that's what this whole, like, there has to be a reason that I got picked on so hardcore, and it pushed me into the path that showed me where I shine in the world. And I just, if anybody can take anything away from this interview, look back at your life, look at where the universe has told you to go, find the place that you shine, because that's what we all need. We need that from everyone. You need to shine.
I completely agree with you. And as a parent, as an educator, and as somebody who's just really interested in exploring the wider literary endeavor, honestly, because again, I think your DIY approach that you described, where you're your own master, right? Your own editor, your own employer. I mean, for some people, that might be considered a liability. I would consider that only a liability if you are lacking in vision or if you're lacking in self-discipline. If you see it as sort of an ongoing endeavor to just kind of get it out into the world to its best advantage, and being open to the experiences that will sort of accompany that, if you're confident enough with yourself to be able to do that, then that is just a real gift. And I think that you are a really strong example of this, because I mean, I've heard and watched you kind of talk about these projects, particularly the Project Human, basically since you started writing it, because I think social media is one of the aspects about it that doesn't suck. And there's a lot about it that does suck, but just sort of making yourself accountable by putting out a public deadline, right? That's what a lot of literary kind of folks say, like, you're only as good as your deadline and your willingness to adhere to it, right? You're
right
to move something forward. So kind of just put it out there in public, as you have, I think takes a lot of courage. So again, without going too far to the weeds, you chose Project Human to be sort of a speculative science fiction fantasy kind of area. I mean, have you always sort of consumed genre kind of novels from that area, like in terms of films and stuff? Or, I mean, have you sort of had other projects and the science fiction or fantasy was sort of the one that fit for this? You know what I mean?
Well, by the time I hit grade 12, I had a big old ego about my writing. And I was at King's Edge Hill School in Nova Scotia. And I was like, oh, I can write anything, you know? And a really good friend of mine was like, yeah, I bet you can't write science fiction. Because she knew I didn't read it. And she said, I'll bet you $100 you can't write a science fiction novel. So when I published this she sent me $100 for the book. So, but yeah, so she had like kind of goaded me on, and I was like, yes, I can write science fiction. And I actually did write a science fiction novel back in grade 12 that isn't, it's not publishable. It's probably publishable as a short story. Like there's a couple really good short stories in there. I got my mom to read one section of it way back when, and she read it and she was like, she has a British accent, so I'm going to mimic her. She was like, oh, this is the most disgusting thing I've ever read. And I'm like, awesome. That's exactly what I was looking for. You know, like that was the reaction I wanted. That's why I wrote what I wrote. So yeah, I did write a book, a whole novel, science fiction novel in grade 12. But I never published it, and I never went to her and said, oh, you owe me $100. It was just like to prove to myself that I could do it. And in order to do that, I started reading science fiction and consuming science fiction, and I found out like this wild universe of like possibility. Like that's where I really like to imagine, and that's where I really like to reside. So, I mean, at this point, a big fan of Star Trek and Star Wars. Don't ask me which is better. They're completely different. Big fan of Battlestar Galactica. What an amazing opus. And Project Human was actually a television series that I pitched in 2013 to a guy named Matt Lowe's. I hope he's watching someday, who was the vice president of acquisitions for Fox Studios. And he absolutely loved the pitch. And he said, this is big budget because this is galactic. If I sign you, you're not going to be running where the story goes. You're not going to be running the show. So he said, look at Walking Dead, look at Game of Thrones, go home and turn this into a series of books. And then people like me are going to be in a bidding war over this because this is some really cool stuff. And that was like the nicest rejection that I've ever had. And so I took his advice and I went home. And originally the series was like meant for adults, like 10 o'clock kind of time slot. I was going to go big or go home. And then when I started writing books, I actually decided that I wanted my main character to be a teenager because I thought it was way easier to integrate a teenager from the idea that the Earth is the only life in our galaxy to the galaxy is absolutely teeming with life. Like if an adult finds that out, it's a whole lot harder to digest, and it's going to be like a whole lot more mental push and pull. And I wanted my book to be adventure. So I chose a 14-year-old girl as my main character because teenagers are much more malleable in what they will accept and what they will change their paradigm to suit. And so that's where that came from. But it's also like an ode to a whole lot of ancient civilizations from around the planet, because every alien species in my book is inspired by an ancient civilization. And the concept is that they came here and they used their DNA to create a super species and couldn't do it. And so they created 4 different flavors of humans around the world and then left us so that we would interbreed. And the end result would have kinship to all, but affinity to none, because none of them raised us. But they left hints of their cultures all around the planet. And that's why we have so many different ancient cultures, but that all kind of have like the same flying machines and stuff like that going on in them. So really, this is like a lifetime of research and my love letter to all the cultures of planet Earth.
There's so much imagination and curiosity behind what you're doing. I really have to appreciate how wide you're casting your net. I really appreciate the approach here where you're saying yes to things that you like and including them because they're awesome, rather than sort of like, well, it's got to be this kind of book or that kind of book or whatever. You are literally motivated as a passionate person, as a thoughtful person, as a mom to some kids, as somebody in the middle of life in the best coast of Canada, which is the east coast of Canada. Maritimer for life. I just got to say, Maritimes for life. I don't say it often.
I spent 3.5 years living in Vancouver, so I'm not like Maritimes for life. I did go away. I went away. I opened a record label called Fat Chance Records. I published an album of songs that, again, crossed a whole bunch of different genres because I was doing my own thing. So you couldn't pigeonhole it into pop or rock, or I call it angry chick rock and roll, but there was some like electronica stuff in there and some love songs in there too and stuff. So really it's just like the creativity inspires me. And then if it comes out through instruments or it comes out through words, it's all good. It's all just part of the,
well,
part of the magnet.
Sorry, again, just a lot to unpack potentially, because again, right, with the music aficionado aspect of the podcast that I do with Dan and this stuff, I just want to. You've been involved in a whole wide range of endeavor, and you've sort of done a really good job of kind of describing, Project Human, what your current motivations are. I wonder, I mean, part of me sort of wants to ask from the educational trip a bit is like what your standpoint is on AI, generative AI, in terms of either hindering or potentially moving forward a creative endeavor like writing or, I mean, even musicianship, right? Because you're deep into that too. Yeah, I always have been. So I guess if I could just put that to you, right? What's your thoughts on the AI stuff?
AI is excellent for research.
Okay.
AI engines are like a walking, talking encyclopedia of everything that they've been able to vacuum up. So you can get a whole bunch of different perspectives. You could ask AI, give me paragraphs on the trucker convoy in Canada in 2022 or whenever the hell it was, from a liberal Trudeau perspective. And then you can ask AI, give me a dissertation on this trucker convoy from a Canadian conservative perspective. Give me a dissertation from a Trumpian conservative perspective. And you're going to get 3 different paragraphs. AI is an excellent research tool. AI has zero creativity. AI doesn't have the ability to be creative. AI has the ability to vacuum up a whole bunch of stuff in one area and then mimic and copy. But AI doesn't create anything new. AI wouldn't be able to create the crazy storyline that I've created. AI might be able to mimic it someday if there's enough of my content out there. Now, I've put a thing in the front of my book that said that this book can't be held in any kind of database without my consent. So if AI ever scoops up my work and starts spitting out stuff that's like me, then I have the legal ability to go after it. But yeah, I think AI could definitely get too strong and too smart, and maybe it already has and will be the undoing of the human race. But there is a stopgap to AI, and that's the big burning sun that we have up in the sky. And the next time that burps out a CME, like what happened in 1859 at the Carrington event, there isn't going to be any electronics left on this planet, and that's going to solve the AI takeover problem. So, the world's going to take care of us, even if we don't take care of it.
Jeepers Creepers.
You weren't expecting that, were you?
Jeepers Creepers on a stick. A lot to unpack. I'm really motivated to go further into your writing based on just kind of the wide informing sort of the world building, right? You take your observations of contemporary society, what's going on around, you tell them in a way that is going to entertain yourself, right? Because I tell my students in my writing classes, the students who do writing in my classes, you got to be your own best audience, and you got to be your own best critic, and you got to be your own best editor, right? Before anybody else even sees the stuff. And being curious, right? Including your whole viewpoint into the task at hand. That's where time in the chair, attention to craft comes in, right? Like anybody can have talent, I think, but it's a matter of discipline. It's a matter of good work habits. It's a matter of, being curious, engaging with the world around you. And I see your direct approach here in terms of all aspects of it, production, marketing, storyline, editing, all of it. Really, really commendable and really interesting. I wonder, in terms of, sort of regional, sort of Atlantic Canadian, authors who are kind of going the indie route or, maybe more of a traditional sort of approach. Is there anybody of our kind of region that is doing a good job that you follow, that you're interested in, that you would like to shout out potentially within the context of this interview?
Oh, now you're putting me on the spot. And if I don't shout out someone, then I'm going to be a jerk.
That's okay. That's okay. That's fine. I'm just if you had anybody that, came to mind right off. But again, what you're involved in right now, is a pretty singular enterprise. And again, right, like the whole wide spectrum of what people do for authors and authorship in any area, right, is kind of, it's an interesting thing. So we can say
I
that.
give a really big shout out. There's a couple of authors down in St. John, and I can give a really big shout out to them. Amanda and Shannon. Amanda Evans and Shannon Dykins. And they created a company called Partridge Island Publishing that had a container at the docks at Area 506 where the cruise ships come in, and they were selling nothing but Atlantic Canadian independently published books.
Awesome.
So a lot of their stuff was New Brunswick, but they had some Nova Scotia, some PEI, and some Newfoundland. And the people were coming off the cruise ships, and they want something that's local because they want a souvenir. So this was an excellent fit, but unfortunately, the moist weather in St. John, like sometimes like the severe fog, like it would get into the container and it could warp the books. And they had to be open even like when there's a cruise ship in, they have to be open. So they were only like during cruise ship season, and they wanted to do a permanent thing. So they have secured a spot in Market Square. They are opening a coffee shop / event area where there's already existing book clubs in St. John that are going to have their events there. And once again, they are selling authors that are local authors. So instead of me shouting out 1 or 2 local authors, I'm going to shout out Partridge Island Publishing. You can look them up on Facebook, and they've turned, I can't remember the name of the store, which is absolutely horrible. I was just looking at their Facebook page, and it's still Partridge Island Publishing. So, but you can go there, and then you can buy a ton of local maritime author books right from them.
That is so nice of you to put together such a response on the fly when I was clearly putting you on the spot. It wasn't very nice of me to give you kind of, because it's like name one author with a book that you like. Like I don't even, if you ask me that question.
N.K. Jemisin. 100% N.K. Jemisin. The Broken Earth trilogy, but she's not local. But the Broken Earth trilogy just blew my freaking mind.
Forgot your favorite all-time authors. That's awesome. So now we have our shout out to our local, and again, right, for people who are checking out the show who aren't familiar with New Brunswick or Atlantic Canada, the 506 area of the waterfront of St. John, Area 506, the project and Container Village, is really, I think it's rad. I lived in St. John for a year for a job that didn't last more than a year, not that long ago. And the efforts that are being made by, I guess, probably the millennial cohort, like the younger bureaucrats or whatever, like it's starting to come to fruition, right? Like people who actually have modern concepts of what a performance space should be. And as you say, right, ways to get local into the hands of those ginormous, each of those ships is the size of a city, right? Basically, it's a floating city, each of them. And if you have 2 or 3 of them, I think it can accommodate up to 3 on, the port at its maximum. I mean, lots of people just kind of go wandering around St. John and they just leave with a little bit of St. John, right? So this is where supporting local authors and being part of a strong regional, sort of association. And so I guess apart from giving you one opportunity here towards the very end to sort of shout out again your current passion projects a little bit more, I just wanted to say in terms of just for anybody who is trying to get into writing, who sort of has that idea, like I am interested in writing a story or I have some vague kind of concept of it, but I don't really know where to start. I mean, what would you tell somebody who's just kind of coming at it for the first time? And then if you shift that into your kind of final thoughts on what you're up to now, we could do a twofer for the end of the interview.
I would say the very first thing that you need to do is an outline. And there are a lot of people who just sit down and start writing and they ramble and ramble and ramble, and that's their process and that's fine. But my advice would be write an outline, because I could drive from Fredericton to Halifax and I could drive through Vancouver doing it and waste a whole lot of gas and a whole lot of time. If you write an outline and every chapter has a purpose, But it's kind of like that's coming from my writing movies. Like every scene has a purpose. It's either driving character or it's driving plot or it's delivering something. So every single chapter has to have a purpose and has to move something forward or develop a character somehow. And I mean, that's moving something forward. So I would say write an outline. And if you can't be interesting all the way through, then you got to figure out how to fix that within your plot before you start writing the book. Because the hardest thing, I've read scripts, I've done script doctoring, and I've read people's books. And the hardest thing for novice writers to understand is like there's your inciting incident, and then there's your big climax, and what the heck happens in between those two? And there's got to be a whole bunch of conflict and things that are happening that are moving things this way and moving that way. And it's got to seem authentic, but surprising but inevitable. Those are my two words, surprising, but inevitable. And when I'm writing Project Human, when I'm writing like my fiction, if I'm editing and I get bored, I stop and I gotta throw in conflict. And it's always like torture the hero. How can we make the hero's life difficult? Torture the hero over and over and over again. And it sounds crazy when you're a writer and you develop this character that you absolutely love. You don't want to torture that character. Go pick up a fiction book and see how much fun it is if the hero isn't going through the absolute worst shit of his or her life, right? That's what you have to do. So you have to write an outline, and your outline has to clearly demonstrate how you are going to torture your main character right up until the very end. That's my best advice that I can give. I'm actually trying to put together like a class on writing and on editing because I'm like kind of tinkering with the idea of writing a nonfiction book on my editing process because I have like specific things that I do. So, you know, anybody that's interested in that, come to my website, sign up for my newsletter, follow me. And when that project comes due, you'll find out about it. But yeah, so that's another thing that I'm kind of working on. Like I'm a person who likes a whole bunch of different projects. I started playing violin when I was 4 years old, and my violin teacher quickly learned that if she gave me one piece of music, I would come back and I wouldn't know how to play it. If she gave me 3 pieces of music, I would come back with all 3 of them mastered. Because I do 10 minutes on this, and then I do 10 minutes on that, and then I do 10 minutes on number 3, and then at that point I can come back to number 1 again. So I have multiple projects on the go. People who know me know that that's the way I operate. People who are just meeting me think it's insane. But that's how I roll. And that's another piece of advice that I could give to people. Know yourself. Know how you work best. Don't fit into a box that doesn't fit you. I'm self-publishing because I didn't want a publisher to tell me, I want you to put a dog in there because people like dogs right now. I have a story that I want to tell. I had enough of that in the film world. Like there's lots of producers and script dogs. Oh, we got to put a dog in there. People like a dog. Like, no, screw off. That doesn't serve my story. So I'm doing my own thing, and that allows me to write science fiction today and then to write nonfiction tomorrow. Whereas if I was going through the traditional publishing route, I would need a different agent for different categories. I don't have time for that nonsense. Like I can figure out how to format a document on my own. I can figure out how to upload it to Amazon. I opened my own limited liability company called Almondale Entertainment Inc., and I do all of my publishing through that. And I actually do all, this is going to show you how much of a geek I am because I want to geek out right now. But I do all of my accounting documents myself by hand for my limited liability company so that when I file my taxes, I know they're being done properly. So, you know, the world is your oyster. You can learn to do anything for yourself and take control of your life. And I want to encourage anybody that wants, you know, if you're not in it for profit and you're not in it for excellence, what the hell are you doing there, right? So I do things for excellence, or I do them for profit, or I just stop doing them.
I find so much what you just described agreeable, in that I agree with it from a practical standpoint. As somebody who myself have tried out various kind of things, and again, one of the things that I kind of bring to my students when I talk to them is really like people our age, kind of in our 40s, were really the last people on planet Earth, really, 40s, 50s, 60s, Gen X, to remember the world before the internet was just ubiquitous. And I find that increasingly something that's valuable because a lot of the millennial crowd, right, 1985 and sort of after, aren't necessarily going to have the clearest recollection. And Gen Z, I mean, just forget it, right? It's just they have never known a non-digital world. And so everything you described about just sort of making it your own, sort of having the physical element, sort of controlling the DIY. I mean, I think my analogy is that's very punk rock. I know that isn't like everybody's thing, but I like to think
it's kind of punk rock, isn't it? It is kind of.
I think very much so. Because like DC hardcore, like we just like are literally engraving the record onto the record machine next to us. It's that level of like I want every detail to be just so. I want to experience every moment in the most tactile, personal way as possible. And this kind of endeavor that you are in is really a substantial, meaningful work that encompasses a whole lot of narratives and storylines just to reach the point that you brought it to. And so that's why I don't want to do like, well, let's just ad lib on the themes and stuff, when you're not like, what I appreciate to kind of wind down is your attention process, craft, being sort of inclusive on what you're looking at. And again, we're not the 51st state yet.
And we won't be. No, we won't be.
You said you wanted to talk about it, so we can go out on that. You have some opinions that you're trying to express through your works in progress. You can speak to that now, or anything else, I guess, on the way out. This will be a 40-minute interview. So, anything you want to kind of go out with here?
Okay, so my website is projecthumanbooks.com, and if you go there, you can find Project Human, the novel, and you can find a link to where you can get it on Amazon. I'm doing all of my printing through Amazon because it's just easier. And if you're Canadian and you buy it on Amazon.ca, you are not buying an American product. The books bought on Amazon.ca from a Canadian author are manufactured in Canada. I think it's Ajax. And it's like printed in the back of my book. I don't want to waste time finding it, but they're printed in like Brampton or Ajax or something like that. And the ones
yeah, that's awesome. And shout out to the 905 region around Toronto. That's great.
Yeah. And then I'm working on book 2, Atlantis Rising. And if you were to find me on Facebook, my group is Project Human. So I think the hashtag is Project Human Books. It's either Project Human Books or just Project Human. But you can find my Facebook group and you can join up and you can follow along there. And then when I get my artwork done for book 2, like that's where people will see it first, there and on my website. And then so I'm also working on a nonfiction book, like I said, I Am Her, and it is a system of meditation. It's a collection of meditations, but it's also a system of meditating that is different from anything else that I've seen published, and that I think works better because it incorporates your own voice into the guided meditation. Most guided meditations, somebody else's voice is guiding you. The strongest voice that you can ever use is your own. So I'm using that concept in my book, I Am Her. So you can look for that. That'll be coming sometime in 2025. And then I'm writing a book that is my reaction to Trump thinking he can make us the 51st state. No how, no way, no hell. I have lots of friends who are American, and I absolutely love them, but I don't want that culture that they have grown up in where my children are growing up. I don't want that culture in my land. We have enough of it from the entertainment that comes across the border, from Hollyweird, like just talking about Hollywood and what we have seen come out in the past, like Harvey Weinstein, that whole thing broke in 2019. That's 6 years ago. Hollywood has not been cleaned up in 6 years. And now it's moved over into the music industry with P. Diddy and all the rest of it. Like, as far as I'm concerned, the USA is a hot mess. And I love a lot of the people, but their culture is a hot mess, and we don't need that up here. We need to protect our children from it. And we also need to protect our water, because I think Trump's coming for our water because they don't have enough of their own. And it takes like, I think I looked it up, it was like 587 gallons of water to refine 1 barrel of oil or something like that. And he's talking about getting away from Saudi Arabian oil and using American oil, but they can only use American oil if they have water to process it. And that's why they want to make us the 51st state, because they're looking at us as a mining colony, and I'm not down for that crap. So there's going to be a book coming out on my website about all of that too. And I am very much a straight talker. I'm a direct person, and I have an IQ of 147. So if anybody wants to challenge the facts that I'm going to bring to the table, bring it on. We're going to have another one of these and talk about some other stuff.
I've enjoyed this so much. I want to be respectful of your time. Thanks a lot for being here. And this is why we're going to have a questionnaire to kind of accompany it, along with some notes. So all of the things that Bea has mentioned, all of her links, all of the various topics that have come up in this really awesome, brief, though it has been kind of chat, that will all appear in a post on a custom website, Writers on Writing, I think is what it's going to be called. It's going up within about a week, and there's going to be a little teaser trailer of this whole even video coming out for social later today because it's Saturday. And we're doing it indie, so we don't have to wait for anybody to do anything on it. Thank you so much for being here. It's been a pleasure. Project Human is the book. Project Human is the website. You got to check it all out. Thanks for being here. I'm going to end the recording now. Take care, everybody.